Greetings, everyone. Damien Dumar here, publisher of The Last Harvest and host of the weekly The Last Harvest podcast with myself, Damien Dumar. In this podcast, we talk about the book The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, which is available on Amazon. And this book covers the agenda by the elite under the influence of the Nebu Gray extraterrestrials to eliminate 90% of the world population and hybridize and enslave the rest. In this podcast, we watch the events foretold in The Last Harvest unfold. So here we have a very interesting story. Donald Trump is not sleeping in court. He's doing something much more worrying, says expert. And Donald Trump has been seen with his eyes closed during his first criminal trial, but a forensic psychiatrist says he's not sleeping. He's in a quote-unquote dissociative state, end quote. Well, I would suggest that it's not so much a dissociative state, but rather a side effect of his possession by Satan, because Donald Trump is the Antichrist. This is the reason why when he gives speeches, he always ends up spouting off gibberish. No, he is not suffering from dementia, although Joe Biden may very well be so. Donald Trump is simply suffering the frequencies mismatch of being possessed by Satan. This is very important going forward because he will be the last American president. Let's listen to what Donald Trump's niece has to say. She says Donald Trump, quote, has a crush, end quote, on Putin and, quote, loves associating with strongmen, end quote. Donald Trump's niece, who is ironically named Mary, and who is a clinical psychologist, has suggested that her uncle's liking for leaders like Putin might be due to, quote, unquote, daddy issues. And in a recent interview with CNN, she said that Donald Trump, quote, has never evolved beyond the kind of person he was when he was very young, and it's not at all surprising because he grew up in an authoritarian household, end quote. Now, if someone has never evolved beyond the kind of person he was when he was very young, that sounds like a cluster B personality disorder, such as narcissistic personality disorder. And before you dismiss me and saying that, well, you're not a psychiatrist, that is correct. However, she proceeds to say, and she is a clinical psychologist, that her grandfather, Fred Trump, which was Donald Trump's father, was, quote, a quite straight-up sociopath, end quote. So as we know, sociopathological traits, cluster B traits, they can be inherited and they can also be learned. So this is something, again, very disconcerting. If you're thinking about voting for Trump, don't do it. Not that Biden is some great choice, but as I've said before, voting for Donald Trump just accelerates the inevitable destruction. So the issue here is, well, it's not so much that Donald Trump has a crush on Putin. He wants to be Putin. He wants to be dictator. And if he gets elected, he will be, because behind him is Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. And Project 2025 is all about turning the president of the United States into a dictator. Here we have an article where Elon Musk blasted actor Robert De Niro, who we all know has hated Donald Trump since day one. And he got angry because Robert De Niro compared former President Trump to infamous dictator Adolf Hitler. Well, Lucien Mars has done the same thing in an article on Notes from the Night Side, because Adolf Hitler was also possessed by Satan, and now so is Trump. There are a lot of parallels between Hitler and Satan. Between Hitler and Trump. Actually, it's not correct, because when you're possessed by Satan, it's really not Hitler there, it's Satan. Just like when you hear Trump talking, well, you're actually listening to Satan talk. So there is no distinguishing between the two anymore. Donald Trump is basically an empty shell. So Elon Musk replied to this clip of De Niro's statements by stating that Trump's policies, quote unquote, bore no resemblance to those of both dictators, and declared that the actor's latest anti-Trump tirade, quote unquote, makes no sense. Well, it actually makes perfect sense. And Trump's policies, you can't say that they bear no resemblance to those of Hitler. There are plenty of areas in which there is a resemblance between him and Hitler, even if not specifically on a policy level. But again, a lot of what one has to worry about with respect with Trump becoming like another Hitler is based on what is to come. So when I talk about all the things that are wrong with Trump, I'm not talking about things that he did during the first 4 years of his first presidential term. I'm talking about what he will do when he gets elected to his second presidential term. And again, Elon Musk, you can't trust him for anything because he wants to put a chip inside your head. And one of the things about the age of Aquarius that we're living in right now is that the age of Aquarius is also called the age of Saturn, and it's also called the age of Satan. As I've mentioned earlier, one of the goals of Musk, who works for Satan basically by his own costumed admission, is to put a chip inside your head, because when 90% of the population has been killed off and they hybridize and enslave those who survive, the way they're going to do it is by planting a chip inside the head, as is mentioned in the Bible. That's the mark of the beast. You can see how this all comes together with Trump being possessed by Satan, Elon Musk working for Satan, and we are living in the age of Satan. And for those of you who are familiar with the book of Revelation, here we have Revelation 9:6, quote, "And in those days people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them," end quote. What does that mean? Well, when you have a chip in your head and you're turned into a slave, you will want to die, but you won't be able to, because the chip will control your mind so that you will not be able to commit suicide. It will have a self-preservation function. This is what is coming. So people need to wake up and realize this. Here we have another article. The star of Reacher gets political again, decries an entire platform by those who mostly claim to be Christians. And to make a long story short, Reacher star Alan Ritchson was making digs at conservative Christians, talking about how he is met with violence for sharing views such as how ridiculous it is that so many Christians are voting for Trump. And he brings up that Christians wishing to commit violence is just basically ridiculous, and that this is not what the message of Christianity is supposed to be. So I think Alan Ritchson gets it. He understands. Here he says, quote, "Trump is a rapist and a con man, and yet the entire Christian church seems to treat him like he's their poster child, and it's unreal. I don't understand it," end quote. Well, he has a point, does he not? Here we have an article. The Russians have sent a warning that nuclear war is now inevitable with millions at risk. And we have an individual from the state-controlled Rossiya 1 TV channel named Dmitry Evstafiev, a Russian political analyst, and that he said that Putin's deployment of nuclear arms against Europe is now an inescapable reality. And he alleged that Russia's plan is to, quote, to change the future of Europe, end quote, which he ominously defined as, quote, 200 million to 250 million dead or maimed Europeans, end quote, as reported by the Daily Star. He identified Paris as a key target and the obliteration of specific European cities. He added that Russia should send a direct threat to every European through postcards. Quote, every European should receive the postcard from us in their mailbox, a postcard with his house, NATO military facility, and the place where there will be a strike and what will be left of their house, end quote, he declared. Now, I bring up this nuclear war because nuclear war is one of the major vectors of depopulation. For those of you who still have views of nuclear war that harken back to Nagasaki and Hiroshima from World War II, where they dropped a dirty fission uranium bomb. I almost said Ukrainian bomb. How funny, right? Uranium bomb. Well, Ukrainians are always dropping drone bombs on Russian soldiers, so it's only natural. A dirty uranium fission bomb, and are not up on just how potent today's nuclear warheads are. We have a website here called nuclearsecrecy.com/nukemap. And nukemap is this very interesting piece of software where you can enter in the city, choose your warhead yield, pick things such as the airburst altitude, press detonate, and look at the rings of destruction. So here I hit New York City with a 50 megaton payload. And as you can see from the map, everything south of Central Park of Manhattan Island has been vaporized, including some parts of Brooklyn, and the rest of the 5 boroughs are in rubble. That's from the type of warheads that are slung about today. And someone would say, oh, do we even have missiles to carry something as large as that? Well, the Russians do. And it's ironically called the Satan II. You really can't make this stuff up. Let's take a look at what it looks like. There you go. Wow. So again, people are not really up on just how powerful today's fusion warheads are, nor are they familiar with the delivery systems. There's a very cool video here on YouTube called Speed Comparison of Hypersonic Missiles by a channel called Redside. It's a very long 18-minute video, but you really can't stop watching it because what it does is it shows the missile traveling at speed, and just when you're done wowing at the statistics of it and realizing what country has it, another missile passes it by an even faster speed. So let's take a look at it. Mach 10. Mach 11. Another one, Mach 20. Takes it over. Really great. Let's see what we get. Mach 24. Mach 20. Of course. So there you have it. Technology has really come a long way since World War II, when the Enola Gay dropped a nuclear bomb. And it looks like it may be coming to a city near you, this new technology. So again, something to keep in mind as the events that are described in the book of Revelation begin to come to pass. So finally, I'd like to recommend that people go and get a copy of The Last Harvest on Amazon.com. You can get it in physical form, you can get it in digital ebook, and you can get it in audiobook. It's available on not only Amazon, but on all major platforms and many minor platforms as well. You really can't miss it. You have no excuse not to read it. And if you don't want to read it, you can still watch my lecture, which is over an hour long at the Luxor in Vegas, where I use PowerPoint presentations and flowcharts and mind maps to explain a lot of the concepts in this book, such as the exopolitical intergalactic history of this planet, various extraterrestrial civilizations, their histories, their role in this planet, and I cover the plans of the global elite under the influence of the Neville Grey to carry out this genocide of 90% of the world's population, commencing in 2025. And again, I don't mean that the world will come to an end in 2025. I mean that in 2025, events will begin to unfold, which will ultimately end in a 90% reduction in the population. So on that note, have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.